Welcome to In the Loop, Tales of the Blade, where we dive into the fascinating and often humorous history of figure skating. Let's introduce this week's hosts.
I'm Carly. I'm the learner on this episode. I don't know what we're talking about. You can find me on Twitter at CyberswanSP.
And I'm Tilda. I am, for once, the storyteller, so you can find me on Twitter at Tilda. So you excited, Carly?
Yes, hold on. We're learning about, am I pronouncing his name right? Ulrich Salchow? I'm gonna guess that's a no.
So, in Sweden we say Ulrich Salchow.
Ulrich Salchow?
Yes.
Nice.
Imagine it's a V at the end instead of a W.
Oh, okay. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. You want to know what I know about him?
Yes, I do. That was what I was going to ask. How do you know this?
Okay. I know that he invented the Salchow, which obviously we're all pronouncing wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And he was Swedish? Maybe? Was he Swedish?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Well done.
He's European.
Yes. So that's why I wanted to share his story, because I'm Swedish and I'm being patriotic right now. This guy is like one of the greatest athletes in Sweden, and obviously his name is not one that people in the figure skating world is gonna forget anytime soon.
Yeah. Is he, like, well known in Sweden?
Not really, because it was quite a long time ago.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, so it's kind of like, you might have heard his name. And I think it's the same for a lot of figure skating fans, as, like, they know he existed, and he invented a jump, and he was probably pretty good. I am probably going to pronounce his name, like, in the English way, because I don't want to switch between Swedish pronunciations for convenience. So, let me start the narrative.
Tell me about his life.
Yes, I shall. And first I want to start by saying that figure skating has like quite an old tradition in Sweden. Some people claim that skating originated in Scandinavia and stuff.
Oh, really?
So, this is like an ancient tradition that we're starting way back. And I'm not gonna like go into all of the story, but just know that.
In ye old times.
In ye old times. The first skating club in Sweden was created in 1866.
Oh, wow, that's old.
Yes, it's a long time ago. And then we have the Stockholm Public Skating Club in 1883. So the interesting about that is that the skating club was actually taking part in creating the ISU.
Oh, really?
Yes. And it is actually one of only 2 skating clubs that are direct ISU members. Still.
I have you to blame.
Which is interesting, because normally in the ISU you have the feds that are members, and then the skating clubs are like associated with the feds.
Yeah.
But the Stockholm Public Skating Club is like a direct member.
That's really interesting.
Yeah. So, in this, Salchow comes in when he was born in 1877, and his full name was Carl Emil Julius Ulrich Salchow.
That's a long name.
Yes. You got the Julius Caesar vibe, too.
I was gonna say, I heard Julius, and I was like, Julius Caesar, my man?
Yes. And he was actually born in Copenhagen to Danish parents.
Fake Swede!
Fake Swede. His brother was an author who wrote, like, spy novels.
Oh my god, that's so cool.
Yes. You can still get the spy novels at the library, so I've been thinking of, like, checking them out.
Dude, do
Yes.
it.
Yeah.
I love spy novels.
I know, right? Wilhelm Salchow was his name.
Okay.
And Wilhelm was deported from Denmark because of unemployment.
Oh no!
And meanwhile, like, I guess Ulrich was just, like, chilling in Stockholm.
He's just like, yeah, I'm starting my figure skating career. My brother just got deported.
Yeah. And Ulrich also married a Danish woman who was a doctor, actually, called Anne Elizabeth.
Whoa, marrying up.
Yeah, I know, right?
Isn't that the goal?
I know, right? Icon. I'm just gonna get the sad stuff out of the way and say that he died in 1949 when he was 72 years old.
Okay, so he lived decently long.
Yeah, sure. And boy, did he have time to do a lot during his life.
Yeah.
Let me get into it.
All right, let's go. Let's dig deep.
Yes. Okay, so I'm actually going to jump ahead to when he's 19 years old.
Okay.
because that's when he had his world's debut. This was 1897, and he actually got the silver.
Oh, dude, awesome!
And when you think about it, that was actually quite young at that time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, definitely. But, like, silver on your world's debut, isn't that the goal?
I mean, to be fair, there weren't a lot of competitors.
But still.
In those, still. And he came behind the Austrian Hugo, who is, like, going to be one of his big rivals going forward.
Ooh.
And they say that he could have, like, had a good shot at winning because he had, like, really good technique on the compulsory figures, but they were, like, kind of too small. So that was, like, one of his big weaknesses. He had, like, small figures.
It's interesting because, like, I've never watched anything with figures. I wasn't really aware that, like, oh, they could be too small. Like, I still don't really understand the whole mechanics of the figures.
Yeah. And at this time, they were, like, a huge part of the competition. They were, like, the most important part. And then at this time, we also had, like, different national styles.
Yeah.
So he skated, obviously, in the Swedish style. And some people said that he was, like, too flashy. They had, like, a knee bend, which some people call, like, ugly. And they got, like, a lot of power from, like, swinging the free leg. And they were also, like, swinging their arms. So people were like, ugh, ugly. Swinging.
Let me just wave my arms and legs around.
Yeah. And people actually were, like, shocked that they did some of their jumps with, like, an arm raised in the air.
Oh, really?
Yes. Hashtag original Thanos.
Why don't we call it the Ulrich?
The Ulrich, yes. The free program at this time wasn't, like, very jump-oriented. And then, he had, like, quite a flashy program with, like, spins and jumps and stuff. And he invented a new jump. And then some people thought that this was, like, almost a disadvantage because people wanted to focus on, like, what figure skating was really about, which was, like, the figures and the steps.
Yeah, no, that kind of, like, at the time, like, that makes sense, that they were more focused on the figures and they didn't want to focus on jumps. But, like in nowadays, if, like, you could invent a new jump, people, like, I feel like fans would be like, good on you, mate.
Yeah, exactly.
You invented a new jump, like, you do that.
Yeah. So, and I mean, later on, you got, like, the international standard with the compulsory figures, but at this point, it was, like, very much the judges would, like, judge according to, what they considered a good style. And so it was, like, quite a disadvantage to compete in a different country because then people would be like, oh, I don't like your style, so I'm gonna mark you down.
Yeah,
you had, like, the English style, which was, like, very stiff, and then you had the Viennese style, which was more like dancing and stuff. Yeah.
That's really interesting. I never knew that they had, like, different country styles, but it's, like, really interesting to think about. And, like, I wonder if, like, there's still remnants of that today.
Yeah, that was actually, like, one of the main purposes of the ISU was to create, like, more solid judging, a proper system, like standardizing it. So you got an international style and international standards for judging. And it's actually interesting to note that competition forms in those days won't actually be, like, too unfamiliar to our dear listeners today. Because, you had the compulsory figures and the free program. And
yeah,
the judging was actually, like, an early version of the 6.0 system.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, because ever since the start of the ISU, they have had, like, a basic 6.0 system in place. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I mean, people were, like, scored in the free program from 1 to 6.
I kind of wonder how that came about. Like, what's really funny is, like, in our early days of In the Loop, I did the, like, 6.0 episode.
Yeah.
Or the episode where we talked about it. But, like, I don't actually know, like what prefaced it. Like, just, like, how it started. So it's interesting to learn that it's been around for, like, pretty much the entire time.
Yeah. They got, like, 2 separate scores from 1 to 6. One was what they did, and then one was how well executed it was.
Yeah.
They didn't actually, like, get points for artistry in those days.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, like, one of the main differences was that everything, like, all of the competition was held in one day.
Oh, yeah?
So you had, like, the compulsory figures in the morning, and then you had the free programs in the afternoon.
That's stressful. I can't imagine that.
Yes, I know, right?
I'm just like, give them time to rest.
Yes. The first time they had, like, had the competition on different days was at the Olympics in 1920.
Oh, wow.
And that was only because they had too many people competing, so that they had to split it for like organizational reasons.
Interesting.
Yeah, yeah. But can you imagine like if we were doing worlds with like 40 people competing and they had it all on the same day?
Oh god. It's just like, here's a 24-hour figure skating day. You get no rest. Sucks for you.
I'm thinking more about the audience. Like, they have to sit there. At least the skaters only have to skate to a program.
That's true. I'd just be like, I feel like with the competitions, you're already like an ice rink hermit. Like, it'd be even worse
Yes.
with it all happening in one day.
Yes. Oh god. Anyway.
Okay, back to Salchow.
So he got silver in 1897 and 1899 and 1900 at Worlds. So he was a triple silver medalist. And then he won his first world title in 1901.
Yay, Salchow!
Yay! And after that point, he would never again be defeated at Worlds. Like, after that point, it was it. Yeah.
That's cool. He's just like, I'm kicking butt, taking names. Like, he was testing out the waters with those silvers, but once he got a taste of gold, he never went back.
Yeah. He also won 9 European titles.
Javier Fernandez, who?
Yeah, I know, right? Take that, Javi. He was only defeated once at Euros, and that was in 1901. So the year he won his first Worlds. And that was in Vienna. And he got the bronze behind Hugel and Fuchs. And in the first Tales of the Blade episode, we mentioned him because he offered his gold medal to Madge Sayers, right?
Oh, yeah.
So that was his second world title. And she got the silver.
Yeah, I remember researching that. Madge Sayers, awesome lady. Go listen to our other Tales of the Blade episode about her.
Yeah, and it actually seems that, you know, that was just the way he was, because he also offered one of his post medals to Dick Button.
My dude.
In 1947. And Dick Button at that point came second. But Salchow felt that he should have won. And, like, a lot of people agreed, because, like, people were, like, super salty about judging here. But yeah, he was like, you should have won. Here, have this medal.
Ulrich seems like a pretty respectful dude. You know, with, like, giving away his gold medal to, like, who he thinks, like, rightfully should have won. Like, that takes some, like, strength of character.
Right, but it's also, like, very savage. Especially, like, if you're not competing.
That is also savage. He's like, I beat you, but I'll give it to you.
Yeah, and, like, at this competition with Dick Button, he wasn't even competing.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, no, it was, like, this other dude who won. Gershwiller won, and then Ulrich was like, no. No.
You did not win. Not on my watch.
So it's, like, really, really, yeah, savage.
How to be savage and respectful at the same time. A guide to Ulrich Salchow.
I think you pretty much nailed his character right there. Whew, I'm impressed. Dick Button also talked about this and said that, you know, he picked a trophy, and then since he had it given to him, he gave it to Misha Petkovic, and then Misha Petkovic gave it to Paul Wiley. So they made it like, you know, a thing to give a forward to people who they thought deserved it. So
It's just like a game of hot potato with the gold.
So I think it started like a really sweet tradition. So he pretty much dominated. He got the world title in 1903 in St. Petersburg, 1904 in Berlin, and 1905 in Stockholm. And then he actually chose to not enter Worlds in 1906 in Munich, because he felt like the judges wouldn't be fair to him. Because, you know, like Fuchs, who was German, was competing. And the two of them, like, allegedly didn't get on very well.
Ooh.
Fuchs actually skipped the 1908 Olympics in London for the same reason, because he felt like the judges were loving Salchow too much.
Oof.
I mean, we gotta give some props to Fuchs here, because he was actually the first world champion ever in figure skating, so, you know. Props to him for that, right?
He's pretty cool too.
But then Salchow took back his title in 1907 in Vienna anyway.
Nice.
There was actually a funny anecdote about this competition. He actually wrote this himself, so I'm taking it from his own notes. So when this competition was starting, they were of course skating outdoors, and the temperature in the morning was minus 26 degrees Celsius.
That's really cold.
And he wrote about one of his competitors, Per Thorén, also Swedish, that his feet froze twice during the wait for their figures.
Oh no! That's so sad.
Yes.
Buddy, invest in some socks. Some thermal socks would do you well.
And then you know what happened?
What happened?
The organizers allowed some audience members to come down on the ice, which is like normally forbidden. And then the audience members learned to like stand in a long row against the windy side whenever it was time for one of their home skaters.
Were they like defending against the wind?
Yes, they got it like a good windbreak. And then but then the foreign skaters, then they just like dispersed.
They're just like, screw you. I only care for my home skater.
And then Salchow writes that however much I maneuvered, those people ran over to the lee side when it was my turn. And they showed visible and audible amusement at these pranks against us.
I'm just imagining, like, nowadays, like, people standing on the ice as someone skates. I'm just like, they would die.
Anyway, so Salchow went to the referee to get rid of them. And the referee said that, you know, it would be impolite to our hosts to do that. But he did agree that the audience should not be allowed to move during someone's turn.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So when it was time for the final figures to be skated, Ulrich said, all right, I'll go to the other side. And then he did. And then at another piece of ice, he was now actually sheltered by the audience members who had tried to hinder him. And they weren't allowed to move, so...
He's just like, I played you good.
And then, you know, then the audience members realized, like, the comical in the situation where they were helping him, the biggest rival.
Literally, like, he's living up to his nature of respectful but savage.
Yeah.
He's like, I won't force you to move, but I will make it so that you help me.
And he finishes his notes this way. For the remaining figures, the goodwill was a fact amongst the not-so-unbiased group. They were obviously ashamed and tried to milden the appearance of bias against the foreigners. And because I won, I remember the whole thing as a funny event. But if I had lost... It's like, big emphasis on the lost.
If I had lost?
Yeah. But, you know, funny, he can laugh at these things too. I like that about him. He also got the gold medal at the very first Olympic game that featured figure skating.
Oh, really?
Yes, this was in 1908.
Awesome.
This was actually before the Winter Olympics was a thing. So it was the fourth modern Olympic Games held in London, Summer Olympics. And it was supposed to be held in Italy, but they cancelled because there was like an eruption of Mount Vesuvio.
That's a little dangerous.
Yes, it is a little dangerous. Do you know how long this so-called Summer Olympics lasted?
How long?
More than 6 months.
Oh my god, because I figured it had to have been weird because, like, how can you include summer sports and figure skating at the same competition? But I'm like, 6 months, dude.
It started in April, and then it ended at Halloween.
Oh my god.
Actually, to answer your question, the reason that figure skating could be included was because there was artificial ice available in London at the time.
Oh, okay.
The Olympics didn't actually begin well because the Swedish team boycotted the opening ceremony because someone had forgotten to fly the Swedish flag amongst the other countries' flags. Oops! So that didn't start well. And then the figure skating was like the final event, the 28th and to 29th of October. So.
Ooh, so it was like the grand finale.
Yeah, pretty much.
And our dude won!
He did!
Right on!
Right on. It was actually a Swedish podium sweep in men's singles.
Oh my god, nice.
Sweden, Sweden, Sweden.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. And Salchow was, of course, gold. Yeah, obviously.
Good. It's what he deserves.
And another fun fact, apart from singles, the men could also compete in the discipline special figures.
Interesting. What was that?
The special figures are like the cool figures. So it was one of the disciplines back then that stopped existing because, like, I guess people didn't really see the point in competing in it. But and the guy who won it was a Russian, and he was like known as the master of figures, Nikolai Panin.
Interesting.
And there was like a guaranteed medal because only 3 guys entered. It's like 2 British dudes. And then Panine. Men's singles was a bit more popular. They had all of 10.
Ooh, that competition though.
I'm also gonna say that like skating was really popular in Sweden at this time because like every person in the country skated for fun. So people were like pretty knowledgeable about the sport and like the skill involved. So these guys were treated as basically superstars. So moving on, Salchow also won the Worlds that year, and then he won Worlds in 1909, and then 1910 in Davos, where we make our next stop for an anecdote drop.
Let's go.
So Davos is interesting because there were actually 3 skaters who showed off the jumps that they had invented themselves.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, we have, like, this is really cutting edge stuff, so I love this. Salchow had debuted his Salchow already at his first Worlds, but back then it was only a single, and in 1910 he did a double Salchow. Ooh, right? We're at double jumps now, suddenly. And then, do you know Rittberger?
Yes.
Yes. He invented a jump called Rittberger, right?
Yes, which is now the loop, right?
The loop, yes, exactly. Good. So in some languages, it's still called a Rittberger. Not in Swedish, though, because we don't respect skaters who are not Swedes. Kidding. And then a lesser-known Swede, Per Thorén. This guy is a Worlds and Olympic medalist, and still nobody remembers him because the jump he invented did not actually get his name. He invented the half loop.
Oh, the half loop?
Yes. And, people call it the Euler now, but it's actually the Thorén.
Get it right.
Get it right. It's the Thorén people.
That's interesting.
Yeah, so that's 1910. And then I'm also going to mention, like, a big thing that was happening around this time was the artificial indoor rinks that were, like, popping up. Because, of course, before, skaters were very dependent on ice being naturally available, so they could only practice during the winter months. And as for competitions, like a lot of competitions had to be cancelled because it wasn't cold enough, and then sometimes it was too cold and windy. So we got like the first indoor rinks at the end of the 19th century. But then we had the indoor rink opening in Berlin in 1908, which was really important because at that point the indoor rinks were mostly in countries where skaters weren't very successful. But then, we had one opening in Berlin and the German skaters were already quite successful. So suddenly they had like a big weapon, whereas these in Sweden people were more traditional and they didn't open an indoor rink, which was actually the reason why figure skating was not contested at the 1912 Olympics, because I was in Stockholm and they didn't have any indoor rinks.
Interesting.
So suddenly we had like an edge here for skaters coming from countries where they did have access to training all year round.
Exactly, because they could get more practice.
Yeah, exactly. So that's, for example, Rittberger, he was one of the first indoor skaters. So he could practice a lot compared to like Salchow, for example.
Yeah, exactly.
But then, that could also be a disadvantage because during 1910 Worlds, there was a lot of wind and snow happening.
Oh, and so if you're not used to it.
Exactly. And then you had like the hardened Swedes.
They're just like, this is nothing.
Yeah, exactly. But then again, like at Euros that year, it was held indoors and Rittberger still lost to Salchow. So, just saying.
Get wrecked. It's kind of interesting that, like, it was a problem or, like, a disadvantage to some people that some skaters had indoor rinks that they could practice with year-round. And, like, that's still somewhat of a problem today. Like, in countries where figure skating isn't as developed, they have less access to public rinks.
Yeah,
or, like, to private rinks.
Yeah, definitely.
So it's just interesting how it's, like, still a problem, just in a different way.
And, I mean, also, like, the first indoor rinks that were opening at that time as well were for public skating, so it's not like the competitive skaters could really use them. So we have come to Salchow's final Worlds in 1911.
Oh no.
And it was a really important competition for him He wrote for one of the magazines. He wrote, "It is about my 10th title. I knew very well that a failure would rob me of more prestige than all my 9 world titles had gotten me." So, feeling the pressure.
This is so dramatic.
Yeah, I know. It's really... Do you know what happened?
He won.
Yeah, he
Nice.
won.
Nice!
And I just want to read, because he was also a magazine writer, so he did some reporting, and he actually wrote about this competition himself. So I just want to quote, this is my own translation from Swedish.
Mm-hmm.
So he wrote this. In the loop paragraphs, Salchow was brilliant with small, extremely well-drawn and covered figures, but his posture was almost a parody. Schende skated well, a bit brutally. Rittberger decently soft and beautiful. Poole pottered it together fairly well, but was completely dead. Stixrud was sure, but ugly. In the next figure, I and Johansson were superior to the rest. Schende was too unclean in the changes of edge. Rittberger ridiculously small and unsure. Salchow took the turns well, but in other parts was not at all prepared for the task. Stixrud surprisingly good, but still with no posture, and Poole, as usual, pottered together the figure with no speed.
He was so savage.
He was.
He was just like, you all suck. I am here for the gold. Get out of my way. You all are just terrible.
Imagine him writing this article when he was, like, competing.
I just imagine him, like, sitting there with a gold medal around his neck, like, yeah, like, Rittberger, he sucked.
Stixrud sucked.
You suck.
Wow.
God, I love him.
Yeah, he has this sort of, like, brutally honest thing about him, but he also, like, seems quite honest.
Yeah.
And he also, like, defended a lot of people, but even when he was defending them, he had the same sort of, like, brutal edge to it. So he just, like, comes across as really someone who says exactly what's on his mind.
And honestly, I respect that so much.
Yeah, I mean, he seems so intimidating.
Honestly, I would probably be intimidated by him.
Yeah, I mean, imagine this legendary skater just, like, writing these sort of sarcastic, still quite funny, reports from his competitions. I love that.
Imagine, like, the reigning, like, world champion just, like, roasting you. Dragging you through the mud.
Yeah. Despite this, he actually seemed to be, like, really well-liked. He often came across as, like, joking around with everyone and chatting and just generally being a people person. And kind of a party guy as well when he was young.
I feel like I could go have a drink with him.
Yeah, me too. But then also, like, really strong-willed. He was really focused. He could achieve anything he wanted. And that's, when you look at the other things he's done, for example, he was active in biking and sailing.
Interesting.
Yeah, and you know what else he did for fun?
What did he do?
Bobsleigh.
God, what a guy.
Yeah, and he wrote a book called Handbook for Figure Skating on Skates.
As opposed to not on skates.
Yeah, exactly. He wrote many articles, and he created his own skates.
Oh, really?
That's apparently something people did in the old days. Like, it wasn't particularly remarkable, I think. People were just, like, creating their own skates, just, like, for fun. And, being an athlete in those days was not an occupation. So he also ran his own company.
Just casual.
Yeah, I mean, gotta earn your money some way.
Gotta
right?
get that cash.
Yeah. I mean, time worked differently back in those days, I think, because otherwise I don't know how he had time to do all that.
Yeah, that's true.
And he was part of so many committees. He was the ISU president for 12 years.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
After he retired, he also created or took part in creating the Swedish Figure Skating Association, and was also a member of the board for several years. And he was also part of the board for the Swedish Sports Confederation. He was also a longtime chairman of the Swedish Boxing Association.
Okay, what even?
Amateur boxing, yes, really.
I'm Dude, what are you doing?
and the Swedish Cycling Association.
What even?
I'm just wondering, like, who enjoys being part of committees? Like, really?
Honestly, he seemed like that person that like you aspire to be, who like does all these different sports and like is a part of all these committees, and like that person in like that you always aspire to be, like that's him.
Yeah. And he was also president of a Swedish sports club called AIK. And I just have to tell you that there's a rhyme in the part of Sweden I'm from, which is lär dig krypa, lär dig gå, lär dig hata AIK. Which means learn to crawl, learn to walk, learn to hate AIK.
Learn to hate.
All my life, I have learned to hate AIK. So, I'm holding that against him, actually. That's his flaw.
You're just, like, reading about him and you're just like, oh my god.
I mean, I can probably forgive him for being president of that sports club, but,
Probably.
Probably, yeah. And he was also actually active as a referee in a lot of figure skating competitions after he retired. And he was known for saying, "What isn't forbidden is allowed."
I mean, he's not wrong.
Yeah. I think that's a message that we can wholeheartedly endorse.
That's gonna be my life motto.
Yeah, but I'm imagining, like, when he was using this, I'm imagining, like, a lot of people complaining about skaters doing unconventional things, and him just being like, "What isn't forbidden is allowed."
He's not wrong. Right on, dude. Right on.
Yeah, right on. Yeah, he had a lot of influence even after he retired, and he was a big inspiration, especially like creatively. A lot of people pointed out, for example, how similar Ritberger's programs were to Salchow's, and he actually chose to retire at a really fortuitous moment because figure skating was about to be struck with a great tragedy, the First World War.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I realized he retired after his 10th Worlds, right?
Yeah.
So I was like, that was right before World War One. So like, obviously it would have taken a dip then.
Yeah, and actually after 1914 Worlds, there was no Worlds for 7 years.
Oh wow.
So that's why the Olympics of 1920 were a big deal, because it was the first major figure skating competition in 7 years.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
At that competition, Germans and Austrians were banned from competing.
Oh man.
I wonder why.
Weird.
So, I'm gonna end on this note. Picture 1920, first major figure skating competition in almost 7 years. 8 years since the last and first time figure skating was featured at the Olympics. Who could resist it? Not Salchow. At the age of 42, he had been retired for 11 years. He was the uncliest uncle. Rumors abound ahead of the Olympics. They said Salchow was back. So there was a record number of competitors at this competition, and indoor skating was still quite new and exciting. 1920, Salchow unfortunately caught a terrible cold.
Aww.
And at practice, he also injured his knee. And he had to compete with it, like, swollen and stuff.
Aw, old man.
And then disaster was a fact when in the free program, Salchow fell on a... Salchow!
Oh no!
He did not manage to defend his Olympic title.
Rip in peace.
I should think that ending up 4th place would seem like pretty darn good.
Dude, 4th place at the age of 42 is pretty impressive.
Yeah, yes. That is where I will end this tale.
I love this man.
I knew you would.
I love this man. He's the greatest. He's like, yeah, I'm 42 years old. I'm gonna go compete anyway.
I mean, you gotta admire him. He wasn't afraid of, like, ruining his reputation or anything. He was just like, he had to go.
He was just like, yeah, whatever. I'll do it.
I'll do it.
What an icon. Jeez.
Yes, we should all take inspiration from his story, I think.
We should all take inspiration from what isn't forbidden is allowed.
Yes. I'm going to make that the new ITL motto.
What isn't forbidden is allowed. Sponsored by Ulrich Salchow.
Thank you for listening. We hope to see you again for our next episode. If you want to get in touch with us, then please feel free to contact us via our website, inthelowerpodcast.com, or on Twitter or Tumblr. You can find our episodes on YouTube, iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, and Spotify.
If you enjoy the show and want to help support the team, please consider making a donation to us on our Ko-fi page, and we'd like to give a huge thank you to all the listeners who have contributed to our team thus far.
You can find the links to all our social media pages and our Ko-fi on the website.
If you're listening on iTunes, please consider leaving a rating and a review if you enjoyed the show. Thanks for listening. This has been Carly
and Tilda.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Hope you learned something new.